to the Filmcast's review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Still reeling from the loss of Gamora, Peter Quill rallies his team to defend the universe and one of their own, a mission that could mean the end of the Guardians, if not successful. I'm going to read separately from this profile of James Gunn at the Hollywood Reporter. Hollywood Reporter did a story about James Gunn and how his tumultuous history with the Guardians franchise. People may or may not recall he was actually fired from the Guardians franchise before there was a massive campaign to bring him back, and then obviously he ended up writing and directing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now he
potentially one of the biggest L's for Marvel.
One of the biggest corporate L's for Marvel. Of course, now James Gunn works for a rival studio, so that's also important context. But
runs the rival studio.
Right? This is a quote from this article at the Hollywood Reporter. The headline of the article is James Gunn's Guardians, How Chris Pratt and his Marvel castmates Rescued Their Director's Career. Quoting from the article, despite the camaraderie and feel-good vibes at the shoot, these are serious times for Marvel, and the pressure surrounding Guardians 3's release is high. The film arrives at a critical moment for the studio, which is facing challenges on several fronts. Its most recent title, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, has underperformed and was a dud with critics. Meanwhile, one of that movie's stars, Jonathan Majors, who is supposed to anchor the next several years of Marvel films as its chief villain, is facing domestic assault charges in New York. That incident occurred right after longtime production executive Victoria Alonso was fired for making the feature Argentina 1985 with another studio, end quote. So a lot of tumult at Marvel, a lot of questions as to whether superhero movies are going to be as viable as they were in the past moving forward. In light of all that, Devindra Hardwar, I'm going to ask you a very exaggerated, hyperbolic question.
Sure.
And redundant, too, because I said exaggerated and hyperbolic. Does Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 restore Marvel to its former glory?
Well, Dave, I think this movie is too long. It's pretty shaggy, wears its heart on its sleeve. And I also think it's a masterpiece. So yes, I do think it does kind of restore some of the glamour to the MCU. I think this is the most James Gunn movie to ever James Gunn, to be honest. I've been following his career forever. And this guy loves making movies about a ragtag group of outsiders who are like, who are trying to make some sort of found family against the sort of like conformity of the society around them. There's so much weirdness in this movie that feels absolutely refreshing. And it reminds me of like when the MCU can be genuinely weird, which I think they were trying to do with Quantumania. And that just felt like so much of that, the weirdness in that movie felt like it was pre-manufactured, like CG clip art almost. Like nothing felt like, the actual artist's intent, the director's intent of like whatever this thing is going to look like is actually there. I just feel this as somebody who's watched James Gunn's movies, that this is so him. This is purely him. And I think it has, some problems, sure. But I think ultimately it is really fascinating to see the creative vision of a single writer and director span across 3 Marvel movies. And we haven't got that before, and that's what makes the Guardians movies so special and so unique amidst like all the other MCU stuff. I love the first one. I think everybody kind of loved the first one. The second one was kind of a little more hit or miss, but I still appreciate like what it was going for. Like there were definitely themes of family and fatherhood and growth there. And this movie is ultimately about it is more self-discovery. It is self-enlightenment. It is about, yes, understanding the people around you, but also understanding yourself more. And there's so much personal growth in here that I can't help but love this movie. James Gunn is so great at characters. He loves his characters, even when he punishes them and does really cruel things to some of them. There is a character reason for for everything happening in this movie. So yeah, the plot's a little convoluted. I don't think the villain is very like, he is not among the best Marvel villains, like not as sympathetic as some others. But at the same time, Chikuri Iwuji is so entertaining to watch as a high evolutionary. Like there's so much that works about this movie that I also think especially James Gunn fans will appreciate too. I won't mention some of the people that pop up, but it is fun to see their faces back in space. So yeah, I love this movie. I understand it's flawed, but I love it.
Yeah, Chikuri Iwuji also was in Peacemaker.
Yeah.
People might remember him that. He was great in that show as well. Devindra, I thought that was very nicely said. I agree with most of what you said. Minor correction. I do think there have been a couple of trilogies where we have seen the same director do all three. If I'm not mistaken, I think John Watts did all three Spider-Man movies.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, true.
And then
those have a distinct like vision.
And then I think Peyton Reed also did all three Ant-Man movies.
Okay, yeah, that's true. That's true.
So anyway, but we can dispute the quality of those, but just want to acknowledge that there's been a couple of other things where I do agree with your points that this does feel, every one of these movies feels like a James Gunn movie, in my opinion.
I totally forgot that those two movies were from the same director because like it's sort of like the distinctiveness of the vision there. I kind of washed away. But yes, you're right.
Fair enough. Jeff Kanata, your thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Fancy that. Let's hear it.
Unpredictable. All blockbuster filmmakers strive to make CGI feel this alive. With emotional stakes and humor, this makes my personal Marvel top 5.
Whoa!
I
Jeff
agree with
likes
Devindra.
Marvel movies again. Yay!
I like Marvel movies again.
We're back. Everybody.
All is right with the world. We're back.
We're back, baby.
But I do love this Marvel movie, and it is in my top 5 of all Marvel movies. I think it's my favorite Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I didn't love the second one. I think the first one is very good, but this one I think is my favorite of all of them. It really does, as you said, Devindra, wear its heart on its sleeve. It's a beautifully heartfelt, lovely movie. And I wept during it. I laughed out loud numerous times. There are action sequences where I was applauding. There's one long oneer down a hallway that is utterly spectacular and like applause inducing. It delivers on every single level that I would want as a sort of culmination, punctuation mark for a trilogy of films about these characters. I feel like it does great service to all of them. Every character in this very large ensemble has a cool moment, has a really iconic character moment, which is very hard to do with a cast this big, with a number of characters we care about this big. We go to really inventive, wild new places that are just so imaginative and add to the canon of things the Guardians of the Galaxy have done that are over the top and wild, and I've never seen that before. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It has great soundtrack. I mean, it does everything you want from a movie like this. And especially in contrast to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is a movie that I have constantly thrown under the bus. It's really going to be my...
It's not dead yet, Jeff. Just keep going.
Not dead yet. It's going to continue to be my whipping boy, I think, throughout blockbuster season, because it is the low bar, the low watermark for the worst temptation of blockbuster filmmaking. And this movie, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, is awash in CGI. It is wall-to-wall CGI. Environments that are built in CGI. Full characters. Entire scenes where all we're watching are 3, 4, 5 different CGI characters interacting with one another. But does it feel like real places that real people actually are walking around in? Yes, it does. Even when the action, the environment is huge and bombastic and bizarre and boggles the mind, there are these touchstones. It feels like actual actors in actual places. It feels like real characters emoting even when they're CGI characters. It really is the opposite end of that spectrum for me of how a tool like visual effects, like CGI, can be utilized in a way to create these fantastical worlds in authentic, grounded, beautiful ways. And I thought that was worth noting here as well, because as much as they are constantly in places that could not exist, I never was pulled out of the movie by that. I never felt like these actors weren't really in a place interacting with real things, even when stuff is over the top and wild. I think this movie is a triumph. I think it really does reestablish Marvel as the thing to beat for the summer as far as a 4-quadrant, completely satisfying, wildly entertaining experience. Does it have elements of darkness and sadness and some PG-13, real PG-13 moments? Yes. Did that mar the experience for me in any respect? No, it did not. And I think it's going to be a huge hit with families.
Yeah, this movie takes also some really unique chances too. Like, it opens with an acoustic version of Creep.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to
From
get up and
Radiohead,
be like, kids,
Yeah.
this is the good shit. It is a sad, slow song that every lonely teenager, at least during the 90s, played endlessly. And first of all, it's fascinating to see it at the beginning of this movie, but also it's Rocket. It is how Rocket's feeling. And Rocket is emotionally a teenager, somebody who's always felt outside in this world and has never quite fit in. It's a great song, but it's also so perfectly fitting for that character. And then you're starting this big budget movie on just a slow, sad song. I was just like, that's confidence, James Gunn. Because the first movie had to open on like big 70s, thumping, energetic music. Here,
and I'll tell you,
yeah,
I agree with that. And I tell you, it makes me extremely excited to see what he does with Superman.
Yeah.
Whereas it's very different tonally than this movie and the kinds of movies that you have characterized, Devindra, as being James Gunn movies. I think he's going to have to be working in a very different mode. But the heart of this film, the sort of humanity of it, the goodness that is at the center of this movie makes me very, very, very excited about what he does with Superman.
Absolutely.
100% agree with that. Look, I don't want to get into a whole argument about this because I hate.
Here we go.
I hate when people argue. I hate when we argue, Jeff. I actually agree with like 99% of what you said, except for the part about this being great for families. Here's what I will just say. If you are a parent thinking of taking your child to go see this movie, educate yourself on what's in the movie first.
Yep.
I had
it's PG-13.
I had a number. I had a number of parents reach out to me after I posted my initial reactions on Instagram and Blue Sky and Mastodon, and they said, "Hey, like, what's actually in the movie?" And I told them, and they're like, "Oh, I was gonna go take my young child to go see this movie."
It depends on how young,
and now I'm not going to go do that. And they and then some of them saw the movie, and they're like, "I'm really grateful that I did not take my child to go see this."
It's PG-13, but it goes hard in ways that I didn't expect. Like, there's a severe animal cruelty here, but also there's a point where somebody's face gets kind of
let's not get into
the whole thing.
Spoilers, but I think Jeff, you bring up a good point. It is PG-13, and I mean, I personally, first of all, think that honestly, I think it is really at the line of PG-13 and R, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You may disagree, that's fine. And the other thing I would say is a lot of parents aren't used to what the PG-13 of Days of Yore was like.
Well, that's the problem, is that we have sort of PG-13 has become the new PG.
Yes,
and people think that you can take a 6 or 7 year old to a PG-13 movie, and I think that's a problem. PG-13 existed because Kalima Shakti Day, pulling a still beating heart out of the chest of a person in a temple of doom was PG. That was a PG movie. So, I mean, I understand this, a couple of things that happen in this movie, but PG-13 means it's appropriate for 13-year-olds.
I think it's good to have that warning. Like, I went to a 10:30 screening. I was like, then I looked at how long this movie was. I was like, oh no. And there were definitely 6 or 7-year-olds on a school night at that screen. I was like, that's something. They were awake and they loved it. So maybe they're traumatized. I don't know.
I don't think it's unreasonable for parents to think, hey, because the first 2 Guardians movies, they had some violence in them, but it's like it's very comfortable to take a child to go see those movies. But like, I think
Mommy, why is that dad's father a god? There's a lot of questions.
This one has some more upsetting material in it. So anyway, just educate yourself. Don't take our word for it. Educate yourself. Look up what's in the movie before you decide to take your children. And honestly, that was why I did. Like, that's part of why I did my walk back of this movie doing as well. It does have an A cinema score, so do you want to call that out? But I think that just like it is in many ways a deeply upsetting movie. Like
it's so upsetting.
It's upset me. I'm a grown ass man, and it deeply upset me to watch this movie. At the same time, I agree with a lot of what you guys have said. Basically, I most agree with Devindra exactly. It's a very shaggy movie. It's over stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on in this movie, a lot of different ideas. But I also agree with Jeff that like this movie takes you to cool new worlds. You actually believe that these people have gone there. It does a really good job of blending CG and practical sets. It makes it feel like, you know, with Quantumania, it feels like, hey, let's put these people on a set and we'll just think up everything around them afterwards. That's what it felt like. I'm not saying that's what they actually did. With this movie, it feels like, let's think about how this world that they're in would work. Like, what are the mechanics of this world? How would things look and feel? And it really does feel like they holistically created it in a way that's really interesting. I really like a lot about what they did with this movie. I agree with you. It's the characters that really make this work. If you are invested emotionally in these characters, I think this movie will do a pretty good job of paying off a lot of what has been built up over the course of the last few movies. It relies a shockingly large amount on the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. So if you haven't seen that, I would definitely educate yourself on that before you see this movie. But
I don't think that's necessary.
I haven't seen that, but I knew enough to be like, oh, well, I know that dog, and I know where they are, and like, that's fine. You get it.
Overall, I had a good time, and I think that it does deliver on the goods. Let me ask, you know what? I had a question. You know, I'll save it for spoilers. So, but overall, we all like this movie.
We all liked it.
I think
to be clear, by the way, your summary of what I was saying, I don't want to chat GPT the situation, Dave. I was being a little facetious at the beginning because I want to do the old topsy-turvy on you because there are complaints, but ultimately
I see
that doesn't matter as much to me.
Fair enough. I was emphasizing your complaints because they're more in line with my thinking about it. But overall, I like the movie as well, and I think I agree with Bilge Iberi's review over at Vulture, which is titled "It's Nice to See a Good Marvel Movie Again."
Yes,
and that's really how I feel. Good. This is my favorite Marvel film since No Way Home. Like, I have not enjoyed a Marvel film this much since No Way Home.
I think it is by far the best since No Way Home, for sure.
Yeah, it has a lot of issues, right? Like, and we'll talk about it more in spoilers. But yeah, go ahead, Jeff. What were you gonna say?
I want to have a little counterpoint to. I think the villain in this movie, the High Evolutionary, is awesome.
Yeah,
I think better, honestly, more compelling, more interesting, more fun than Kang the Conqueror has been thus far. Personally, I think Jonathan Majors' performance as Kang is very good. But what they've done with the character of Kang has been, outside the Loki series, has been pretty uninteresting. And I think this character is super interesting. High Evolutionary is a much more like as he's portrayed in this movie. I mean, he's chewing scenery, and I love it. But also like his big ideas and the sort of the specifics of his villainy is much more interesting, much more compelling to me. I loved the villain in this movie.
Absolutely, you understand what his goal is. You know,
yes.
There are a lot of broad strokes as they paint him, but I do think it is compelling, and also some really great character work from him too. Not a spoiler, but I do think there's a great moment with like a box that he has to step on to be above. What's her face?
So
to be above the tallest woman in the world, so
it really does. It really does kind of make me feel like they really biffed it with the Kang introduction in Quantumania.
Agreed.
It's a shame.
I mean, Kang was technically introduced in Loki, but like,
this was going to be his big.
Yeah, that was going to be, and it's like I think they completely, utterly failed to make you sympathize. Like with High Evolutionary, terrible person, terrible human being, but it's like I understand how someone might think that way. Like,
exactly.
Like they have a goal that is like understandable, right? Like
I think we're building off the Thanos goal too. Oh, he has this goal and he's just gonna do it at all costs. And I think this one's immediately, well, you see the problems here.
Very Thanos-esque. Very Thanos-esque.
But I think it's different enough to make it distinct. And I there's a lot of really cool detail here about how he goes about it, what he did. And this
the
notion of being the smartest person in the room and recognizing that someone might be smarter than you is a wonderful foil for that. I thought that was
security around
pretty
that.
cool.
And also the guy's goal is perfection and the Guardians are not. And I do love that this movie is a celebration of that, the imperfection of humanity, basically. So
agreed.
All right, let's get to spoilers for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 starting right now. So a few things to discuss when it comes to Volume 3 and the ending. I mean, I'm just gonna say the stuff with the animals, dude, super freaking traumatizing, man.
And
Like,
also, perhaps the biggest complaint, it's a little cloying because you're creating these super cute animals who are like clearly like experiments were done on them. They all die. They gotta
yeah,
die. They gotta die. And that, yeah, of course they do. Yeah.
I don't know.
yeah,
I
and
thought it was beautiful the moment
Mhm.
of him
when he
walking
just
toward the light and her saying not yet. It's
That's good.
yeah,
I
and
thought
then when
that
he
moment
like
was
discovers all the little rocket raccoons, the
yes.
little
Mhm.
raccoon, that's a very lovely moment. And to its credit,
Mhm.
I think James Gunn treats all that stuff with the animals with a lot of gravity. Like he's not like
Mhm.
there's no joking around about any of that stuff. He's like, this is really serious stuff, and we're going
Yeah.
to treat it like this, and it's going to be upsetting, but it's going to be thematically related to what we're talking about in the movie, and it's going to
Mhm.
be like worth it. And I do think that it is worth it. Like I don't feel like he was too manipulative or mistreated the subject. But it is
Mhm.
like an upsetting subject, and
It's
I think
upsetting.
he did it well. And
My favorite
yeah.
little moment was when they get the entire zoo of animals. They're having them all come over. There's a stampede of just dozens and dozens of different creatures. And we get that one moment where the woman's like, yeah, and she catches it and it just claws the shit out of her. And she's like, yeah, these are wild animals,
These are
a lot
wild
of them.
animals.
Not huggable.
What do you
I thought
guys?
that was
So
funny.
there is like one complaint I'm seeing across like some commentary around this movie is that scene, the Wonder scene, is against another set of animals that were experimented on, and did they deserve the same level of empathy as the other ones we're letting free? And it's a good question. It didn't bother me as I was watching it because I'm like, those guys are trying to kill the
Yeah,
Guardians,
right.
so it's like at the
It's
very least they
self-defense.
need to defend
But
themselves.
it's awkward. Any TV show or movie that has talking animals eventually comes up with this, it like meets
Mhm.
this problem. And actually, there was a really great episode of BoJack Horseman that addressed this
Mm.
topic. Like in the world of BoJack Horseman, there's talking animals, but they also
Yep.
eat animals, and so it's
Yeah.
like they had to like address it somehow, and they acknowledged it in a really like funny and interesting way, I thought. But yeah, this movie doesn't have time to do any of that. So I agree with you, Devindra. It's like kind of like you can't think too much about that, or else it doesn't work right.
It's a whole thing. I do think like the symbolism of the Wonder is kind of fun because the band is back together and the way they
So
kind of
good.
like just work harmoniously, it's beautiful. Like that brought so many things in this movie brought a tear to my eye, but that certainly did. Yeah.
It's amazing because it's very rare for a Marvel film to still be able to wow you when it comes to action. We've just seen John Wick Chapter 4 that has some of the best, most inventive action in any movie of the last
Of
few
all
years.
time.
And
Of
it's
all
like
time.
and I find myself watching like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like, okay, it's fine. The action's fine. It's not bad, but it's like they clearly put effort into it. But then many movies, it's like, oh wow, it doesn't come close to the creativity of John Wick Chapter 4. Then you see the hallway scene in this, and it's like, wow, like you're wondering, like, how did they even accomplish this? It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah,
And so it's nice
it's
to have a
incredible.
wow moment like that in a movie like this.
I also thought the opening action with Adam Warlock arriving to nowhere was pretty darn cool. And I loved how it interrupted that sort of, we just start the movie in this really kind of serene, lovely, slow place. And then Adam Warlock comes in like a bull in a china shop. And I thought that whole sequence was awesome. And it really established how powerful he is. I thought that was cool.
I thought that Adam Warlock and Elizabeth Debicki, like that was one too many. I know it's like the inciting incident, but it felt
One
like
too many
one
golden
too
people.
many
Yeah.
plots for me. Like it just,
I also, what was her
loved
plot
him.
from before? Like I remember seeing Elizabeth Debicki, but was it Guardians 2? I
I
forget
think they
how
were in a
all-
I think it was
post-credits.
a post-credits, yeah.
Post-credit scene, yeah.
Yeah.
But I have.
Well, she
I have
was in Guardians 2, but then they introduced Adam Warlock at the end. So yeah, that's all we had. Yeah.
I have seen a lot of commentary online that has actually confused me about how when you watch Guardians 3 and the credits, right? If you watch the credits of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, it's scenes and photos and images from like the entire Guardians trilogy, basically.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of people say this movie is kind of an elegy for this era of film going or theatrical experiences where superhero films were like had this place of primacy in our society, right? And that like it's an acknowledgement that like that era is fading and potentially going away, which I'm like, I don't know if I really picked up on that. It may be from a business perspective, but I didn't really get that from the movie itself.
No.
Like, I don't know if you guys picked up on that.
That felt more like saying goodbye to these characters because
Yeah.
Gunn is gone. Like,
Right.
Gunn is going to be doing other stuff for a while.
Okay, cool.
So,
I've seen a lot of people being like, yeah, this movie felt like a goodbye to this era of superhero movies in general. And it's like,
wouldn't that be an odd thing for James Gunn to do if he's going off to literally start a new era of these kinds of movies?
It is a new era. The end of one era.
People are reading in like business reality into
projecting
this movie, which I don't think it's there. Now, here's what I will say about this movie. One of the things I like most about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is what they did with the character of Gamora. They could have easily just, hey, Gamora and Peter Quill fell in love again, and like things are back to status quo. But they acknowledge, hey, sometimes the people who you love change, and sometimes like your time with them needs to come to an end. And like
sometimes you go back in time to get an earlier version of the person you loved before they loved you, and it just doesn't work out. Sometimes
that old chest stuff.
We've all been there.
we've all been there. But it's a different version of Gamora, and then like at the end, Gamora finds her own family, and they kind of like say goodbye, and that's like a very it's a very lovely adult thing, right? It's a very
the interpersonal dynamics are great too. Like Nebula starting in the first Guardians movie was just straight up bad girl, like guy, bad villain, and then we slowly get her humanity. I think Karen Gillan has done some of the best work in the entire MCU, honestly, with that character, because she wasn't she with Tony Stark, when he was drifting through space as well. And here it's like you can also really tell that she kind of likes Peter Quill, and it can't quite happen. She's a cyborg girl and he used to be in love with her sister, and so it's a whole thing, but like you kind of get that sense too. And I like her sense of leadership of this group now. A lot of this stuff, just like, this is just strong character work too. And did you guys catch the Groot thing at the end, which I think is just really interesting?
So the context, so first of all, just before we move to that, I just want to say, the Gamora stuff, a lesser filmmaker, a lesser film would have, like, they got together and everything's happy ever after. But it's like, hey, it's okay to acknowledge that sometimes like you move on from people in your life, and like that's a very mature thing, for message for a movie like this to have. And I don't know if it was James Gunn's decision for Gamora to be like that. Like, I don't know, like it wasn't his movie when that happened, right? Endgame when that happened. So it was like,
well, it's interesting that the very, very last title card, as is Marvel tradition, says, somebody will return. In this case,
Star-Lord
will return, which I thought was very interesting, because maybe that's part of it, is we're setting up Star-Lord for his own solo movie, which will theoretically have a love interest.
He will probably pop up in others too. But
so the Groot stuff is very cool. Throughout all the movies, Groot says, "I am Groot" the whole time. And the characters understand what he's actually saying, but outwardly he's saying, "I'm Groot." At the very end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Groot speaks. First of all, Gamora understands what Groot's saying, even though throughout the movie she hasn't. So it's like, she now understands what Groot's saying. But then you, as the audience member, hear Groot say the words, "I love you guys."
#family.
Now, I saw IO9
I am in another movie this summer. Go see it.
Groot will return. Yes.
That's more of a Sylvester Stallone, who, by the way, was kind of wasted in this movie.
Hey, has there ever been a movie with less Sylvester Stallone in it?
I don't know. Maybe the Suicide Squad, where he was not even on screen. But I saw IO9's explanation of this. IO9 their interpretation was that you are now part of Groot's family, and that's why you understand.
I felt
what
that.
Groot is saying.
Yes.
So
the fifth element is love, Dave. And that's what it takes to understand Groot, is you have to have love in your heart.
The real Guardians were the friends we made along the way. The friends we made along the way. So that was a lovely moment as well. But Devindra, in the pre-spoiler section, you referenced some of the gruesome stuff that happens in this movie.
Yeah, gruesome stuff.
And when the High Evolutionary's face gets ripped off, I'm like, that's just upsetting face off
going at it
stuff.
I don't know. It plays kind of goofy. It doesn't play super visceral to me.
It was pretty. It felt pretty gross.
I mean, they make a joke out of it. It's not.
What's so weird is like Jeff is like the least horror fan among the show.
It's true.
Like we just watch Evil Dead Rise. I'm like, I can absorb that gore. That's fine. But like. But then the guy getting his face viciously ripped off.
In Face Off, an R-rated action movie, we never actually get to see you get a face ripped off. The camera shies away because it's too scary. You can't look at it, Jeff.
You get a better view of the guy's face being ripped off in Guardians Volume 3 than in the movie Face Off.
But see, I think you guys are the weird ones here. You're like, oh yeah, set fire to someone and have them, bleeding out of their eyeballs and all of the Evil Dead stuff.
That's a horror movie.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. It's a horror movie.
You are primed.
This is a comedy.
You are primed for it. Okay. Anyway,
I think. I mean, this. It looks like. It looks like silly putty on his face.
It looked pretty gruesome.
Make a joke out of it. I don't
completely disagree. Okay,
I will say the other thing about the High Evolutionary, his face when we're first introduced to him is straight up RoboCop. And they even make the RoboCop reference, and I do think that's like one of the.
Yeah,
we know who this movie is made for.
Pretty cool stuff.
And who this movie is also made for is fans of Nathan Fillion. Like,
yes.
So yeah,
he's great in the movie too.
He's so good. Like when he popped up, like it was a Thursday 10:30 screening, so maybe fans, but I'm in the suburbs, guys. I'm not near like major fans here. And yeah, people started cheering for Nathan Fillion back in space, baby.
That's nice.
Back in space.
That entire sequence of going to the organic planet.
So good.
Is phenomenal. Like
every beat,
every moment, like the Mantis making the receptionist fall in love with Drax,
which is her go-to
thing. Like, every time you gotta do, and all of that, and Peter Quill thinking he can like charm the lady, and then Gamora aborting that mission. All of that stuff, all of the details of the organic thing, how they break in, even the beginning when they're like. The yellow corresponds to red, green corresponds to blue. All of that. It's so fun. It's so funny. The logistics of that world and how that organic matter all works and how the people's armor all works and how the world in there is like all the elevator where you push your hand into goo. Just every detail of that sequence. I was just like, I love this movie. I love
so much fun.
The world that we're in, how specific everything is, how it all is thought about and thought through and realized in very tangible, tactile ways. I loved it.
It was a balancing act, and also like when Nathan Fillion popped up, I didn't realize he was going to be in this movie. I feel like that was like for me and for specific people who know, like Slither was Nathan Fillion's best movie ever, directed by James Gunn, and also Nathan Fillion, very good in space, being annoyed at everybody around him. And he gets like James Gunn writes for that sensibility of what Nathan Fillion can do so well too. So it's like all those things. Love him so well. Daniela Melchior from Suicide Squad also pops up in that sequence. She's Ura. So good. Like I think that whole sequence like is the best. So this is Guardians of the Galaxy at its best, basically.
Yeah, I agree. Because it's like, hey, we're taking you to fantastic new worlds. You can like an organic building is like just a really cool concept.
Disgusting looking planet.
It's all just really well done, I thought. And probably the highlight of the movie, So
I don't know. I thought Animal Planet was pretty great. I thought Animal Planet was very funny and fun and weird. And I mean, there's so many.
When he goes to Earth 2 or whatever it is, right? Like, Counter Earth.
Counter Earth. Yeah. And I mean, all of that stuff. Everything played for me. Everything played. I mean, even even the ship and the how one group of the characters is trying to break into the ship, the other to save the other group of characters that aren't even on it. All of that. There's so many wonderful ideas.
Classic hijinks.
Agreed.
There is one plot hole that will probably gnaw at me, but I still love this movie. How long have they been traveling with Rocket? And he has never been injured to the point where they had to use like a med pack on him and realize that probably can't do that. This guy, they fought Thanos. They fought hordes of aliens from Thanos. Rocket was never injured enough to like be like, guys, don't use the med pack on me. The magic med packs don't work because of I'm corporate property or something. It's just kind of funny. Yeah,
but
it's fine. Doesn't ruin the movie. It's just like one of those things. Like the entire movie hinges on them not knowing that Rocket has this like thing on him, basically.
Yeah. I also gotta say, Devindra, your issue with like the killing the animals thing.
Yep.
that also came up for me in the post-credit scene where they're like, there's this like army of creatures coming to, and it's like, but didn't we just agree in the previous movie to not hurt animals?
Like literally, they're just standing there to mow down all these precious animals that we just said.
I thought there'd be some line of like,
Me too.
Well, these aren't sentient animals with feelings. They can't experience any pain and blah blah blah. Like they were going to explain.
Weird. Like they could have had them doing literally anything. Then it didn't matter.
Yeah, they didn't have to be animals.
It's just so weird. That
it could have been like they're stopping a volcano from exploding. Like
exactly. It didn't have to be any. And it's such I thought it was so discordant. It was like we just watched them stampede all these animals out, and there's literally a stampede. They're just going to obliterate.
Even more, Jeff. It's like James Gunn has decided I am going to traumatize a specific section of the audience, but in the furtherance of making a good point, which is, hey, you got to treat animals well. You can't, even if they don't speak human English, there's still every creature is worth protecting.
They were here first.
Even if they're and then have a post-credit scene that's like, we're gonna F these things up. Like it's gonna be, and it's like, okay, that's really weird. Okay. But putting that aside, I think that was a good.
It's one of those things.
I like where it left off. I like where it left off with all the Guardians. Like all the Guardians felt like they got a good, solid ending. It was weird to me that they had built up Peter Quill's grandfather. As
I agree,
and it was like, and I'm
just
thinking,
a guy.
Oh, it's gonna be like Tom Cruise or something like that. Yeah, it's like. It's just some guy.
I really thought there was going to be some stunt casting of something, and yet it's just a guy.
It's just a guy, and it's like, okay, but I'll say what I loved about it, Jeff, is the second like post-credit scene shows Peter Quill eating cereal, and they have like a little discussion where he's like, "Isn't it just weird if I'm mowing his lawn and her grandson's like right there?" And that's just like classic James Gunn dialogue of like these awkward moments.
It's a 40-year-old man.
When you're talking with people, it just captures like that feeling so well. And I love that. That's the ending of the franchise for these. That's the ending of the Guardians franchise. He chose to end it on that moment.
It's really lovely. It's really quirky and fun and then it's like he will return. It's like, oh, we're gonna get more of eating
this
cereal.
Exactly. Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Right,
I also love. I mean,
I
love how every single character gets something awesome to do, some realization, some big move forward in their growth. Drax, realizing fatherhood is his whole thing, and because that character's backstory is like he lost his family. That was beautiful. I love the Mantis.
That was great.
I love the Mantis moment of in that big action sequence where she's going around and just like you dance, you go crazy, and like you realize, oh, she's one of the most powerful beings in this entire universe. She could just go up and turn people's brains up against them. That sequence was awesome, and the guy's just dancing while everyone's dying around him. Oh man, so fun.
Any other thoughts, guys, before we wrap this up? I think we all had a good time with the movie. I will say it was like an out-of-body experience. 80% of the time, even if I disagree with Jeff Kanata, I can like understand where Jeff Kanata is coming from, But the other 20%, there's now and then where it's just like, I feel like we had a completely different experience where Jeff's like, I'm like, Jeff, I am like physically shook from that movie and upset. And I don't think that leads to a movie that's going to be number one at the summer movie box office.
Can I tell you something, Dave?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had the exact same experience. Getting a text from you going, "Oh my God, I just walked out of this movie and I'm so upset and disturbed." I was like, "What movie did you see?"
Yeah.
I really did. I have a hard time imagining that that's the takeaway of this movie is how upsetting it is, because I had so much fun. It's so delightful an experience to me.
It's delightful.
I had someone text me after I posted my review, and they asked me what's in the movie, and I explained to them some of the scenes, and they're like, "That is a hard no." Like I'm not. It's not even they're not taking their kids. They're like, "I'm not watching it myself."
Well, but you're explaining to them out of context in a text. It's not.
I think there's some people like, okay, I didn't talk about this in what we've been watching, but I just rewatched. I'll maybe next week. I rewatched Independence Day because I'm going to be talking about it in another podcast. And people are so invested in that dog in Independence Day. People, it's like, hey, you can kill off like literally 3 billion people, but like harm the dog, and that is unforgivable.
Well, that's exactly why this is a villain. That's why he's a villain.
I'm just
Jeff,
saying, I think people react more, for good or ill, people react more strongly when bad things happen to animals than when they happen to humans often.
This is what happens when we make Jeff watch 4 Evil Dead movies back to back, basically. It's just broken.
2 of those Evil Dead movies are legit goofball comedies, screwball comedies.
Fair enough. Fair enough, yeah.
I mean, that's why Bambi's mom dies. That's why, it's...
A plot development that is often referred to as one of the most traumatizing things people have seen.
Happens off screen. This is the horse dying in the Never-Ending Story level of like traumatization. Basically, like this is something that will sink into kids' minds. Well,
let us know. Let us know what you think at /filmcast@gmail.com. Like Jeff and I want to know which one of us is more wrong, which is usually
how traumatized are your kids from this movie?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the bigger issue too is, do you think that will affect the box office of this movie? Because that was your fundamental position. Is like, I no longer think this movie's number one because it's too upsetting to be a repeat viewing.
I saw Top Gun 3 times in theaters. I don't think I can go see this again in theaters. Like this is not a movie I want to go see again. But that's me.
What about all those dogs that Tom Cruise murders in the airplane? Remember that sequence where he's like mowing down all those dogs and he's like, "Die, dogs!"
All right. Well, at the end of the day, it's really impressive that James Gunn made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.